Alrighty guys, hope you're doing well. In today's video I'm going to be talking about the hook, how I see the hook and what the critical strengths are that are most important for a hooking game. Now, you might say, hang on Ryan, you're not much of a hooker yourself, and it is true that I spend the majority of my time defeating my opponents with outside style arm wrestling, but for me the hook plays a very important part because I believe the most important thing in arm wrestling is not to have an A game, but rather to have an ability to counter your opponent. So if I'm up against someone who, through biomechanics, it isn't the right thing for me to be top rolling them, I will be taking them inside initially off the go. So think like people that are significantly taller than me, significantly bigger, that it's just really not going to be feasible, much bigger hands for me to be able to top roll. I'm going to want to take those people in an inside sense before I do any sort of side pressure. And I've done that with great success. I often use an inside pressure initially just to disengage them from their power, and then I often finish with my own top roll force to get the job finally done. So what I'm going to talk about is the strengths, the critical strengths in a hook. And so for me, one of the most important things is that a lot of hookers make the error of just simply trying to be all about cupping through the pinky, and they forget about any outside threat as well. So outside threat is really important for you to be able to gain access to inside, because if you are 100% all about just getting access to inside pressure, then you're not going to get the ability to actually set the hook, because the top roller is going to see you coming and have all the defenses set in place. So as a hooker, it's really important that you have some outside threat first and foremost. So outside threat, like most of the time, the hooker is going to have a shorter forearm than their opponent. Okay, this is like broadly speaking. Yes, you can be a long, tall arm hooker, like a Devin Larratt style hooker. Hello, Bradley. How you doing, buddy?
I want some food.
You want some food? All right. I'll be back in a second. Alrighty, guys, I'm back. So, as I was saying, we're going to make the assumption that the person who is hooking is going to have a shorter forearm length than their opponent. Okay, so that brings with it a couple of opportunities through biomechanics where you can be stronger than your opponent can potentially be, even if they are actually a bigger person, bigger and stronger in that movement. Because of the angles that are at play, you have leverage on your side. Okay, so being able to have your wrist up is going to be easier for a shorter arm person than it is for a longer arm person. Reason being, when the referees get your webbing height the same, the longer arm person is going to be really low, and the shorter arm person is going to be further towards the front of the pad. That makes the angle here on the wrist, okay, easier. It's closer to the top. It's in more power than someone who's quite horizontal trying to lift up and that. So the hooker is going to have a more vertical forearm first and foremost. What you need to use as a hooker is that vertical forearm. You need to dominate the wrist position. You dominate the wrist position, but don't stick with it. Like, don't get me wrong. You might actually find that it's easy to top roll if someone takes a really poor grip. But if you're against someone who's balanced with you in power, okay, they're going to take a grip, and your job is to put significant threat in that wrist so that they are going to realize, oh, okay, I can't beat that wrist, and they're going to come down slightly. Okay, if they come down slightly and they're looking to drag or something like that, okay, it's really important that you generate a lot of threat there, because your objective after the go is to get over what I'm going to call the pivot. Okay, so the pivot would be if you drew a line down the center of your opponent's forearm. The further you get over that pivot when you hook, the better your hook is going to be. The stronger you're going to have in terms of back pressure and down pressure and access to finishing rotation. Okay, the top roller wants to prevent you from getting over that pivot. He wants you to stay palm flat. Okay, we want to get our wrist fully cupped, fully supinated. We need to get over the pivot of our opponent's forearm. So initial strong pressure through the ridge here, just to create the opponent coming towards you. So if I've got my opponent coming toward me in the setup, which I should be able to establish with a shorter arm, they're going to be having a lower hand position thanks to my high, stronger wrist, which presents an opportunity. I really would need another person here to demonstrate this on, but it gives me the opportunity to jump over the pivot using my then supination and cup after the go. If we just stick with the ability of just fighting on supination, letting the top roller get high and not threatening them in that sense at all, what happens is you're fighting up in your fingers. It's going to be very difficult to get over the pivot of your opponent, and it's not going to be a good day at the office. Now, getting over the pivot is a crucial thing. Down pressure is so inherently linked to the ability to get over the pivot. Okay, if you're not over the pivot and you try to impart down pressure, your wrist will flatten and you'll end up having to press with a flop wrist or something like that, which can be a road to victory. But ideally speaking, we want to set the hook. We need to have good strong post, good strong hand to get over the pivot. Once we're there, it's going to be about engaging lats, squeezing down, and only squeezing down so hard that we don't feel our hand coming back up. If you feel your hand as you drag down, if your hand wants to open up like that, you're better off dragging a little bit less and being ready to float forward to the top right of that pad to wait for your opponent to make an error to then capitalize on it. Guys, smoothness and floating around on the pad, and always recognizing that it is so important that you keep your hand in the deepest position you can possibly get it. Okay, so many hookers want to go for a pin too early, and at the expense of their hand, they go for the pin, and which ultimately allows their opponent a whole lot more access to their power. So in order to deny that opponent's access to power and give us the best chance of setting the hook and winning the match, we need to protect our hand. So go as hard as your hand and your rotation can take. If your rotation is giving way, back up a bit. Come to the front of the pad and arm wrestle from there. Guys, that's a few of my thoughts on the hook. Like I said, I don't spend a lot of time forcing many people in hooks. I do have quite a long arm. I've got a longer arm than most of my opponents here in Australia. Certainly when I was in the 80 kilo category, I was longer than just about everyone. And even in the 90 kilo category where I'm competing now, I'm still got a longer forearm than most people. So I still find myself taking guys outside. But when I do compete in the heavyweights and come up against guys bigger, taller than me, you'll see me using these methods. I'll use them, I'll get over the pivot. First pressure will be this down pressure over there, and then I might end with a top roll. But anyway guys, hope you got something out of that and enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys again next time.